And the recording has started, Chair, if you'd like to make a start.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee. I'll take apologies for absence first, please. Do we have any apologies
I've
for
received
today?
none, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I just remind everyone in attendance, if you can keep your microphones on mute when you're not speaking. And obviously you've had instructions in terms of how to use the Welsh translation services. Okay, in terms of the next item then, declarations of interest. Are there any members present who have any declarations to make for today's agenda? No, none. Okay. We'll move then to the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 6th of June. I've not had any requests for any amendments, but happy to consider them if anybody wants to raise them today. If not, I'm happy to move them as a true record. Could I ask for someone to second, please? Thank you very much, Councillor Simpson. All those in favour? Okay, thank you very much. Those are agreed. We'll move now then to our forward work programme. So who's taking us through this item, please? Over to Karen. Karen.
Thank you very much, Chair. So you'll see that the next full meeting of the committee is due to approve the statement of accounts, but also more specifically to start to look ahead at 24-25, what the budget options might be. But linked to that is obviously the priorities the committee would want to progress over that period. We did discuss, I think, in an informal briefing that in advance of that meeting, an informal meeting in a kind of workshop style with leaders would be preferable to include our National Park colleagues. So just wanted to highlight that, Chair, so we've got an opportunity to be considering some of the emerging ideas for next year before we get to the meeting on the 5th. So just to confirm this morning that we will be looking to put that workshop arrangement in place before we get to the 5th of December.
Okay, thank you, Karen. That's really helpful. Any comments or questions for Karen on the report or on the update? No, if not, then that one's for noting. So thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you all at the workshop. Move on then to item 5 was the update on the investment zones. That's pages 13 to 60. And if I can welcome Ross Gill from SQW to take us through the presentation, please. Ross, over to you.
Good morning. Nice to see you. Thanks for inviting me. I'll just share my screen and just run through a short presentation by way of background. If I can find it. Here we are. Hopefully you can see that.
Yeah, that's great. We can see that.
Okay, thanks very much. So we were asked by colleagues at Swansea and Carmarthenshire to do a bit of work to put forward a prospectus for a new green industries investment zone covering the 2 local authority areas. And I think you should have in your pack of papers the draft prospectus that we've put together. I'll just give you a bit of background to the investment zone concept and the approach that we've taken in developing the prospectus. And starting off with what's an investment zone. This is what UK government have stated that they're trying to do. You may recall that back in the short-lived Liz Truss administration of last year, they launched a programme which they referred to as investment zones at the time, which I think were anticipating quite a large number across the country. That policy approach got stopped quite quickly, but the government came out with a new proposal earlier on this year to allocate a limited number of investment zones, as it says there, focused on developing what they referred to as high potential clusters in areas with unmet productivity potential. We anticipate probably 9 or 10 across the whole of the UK. So there are 8 that have been pre-announced in England, which relate to combined authority areas, likely to be one in Wales, likely to be one in Scotland. The intention of them was to build on areas where there are sectoral strengths in relation to a limited number of sectors which government predefined in its policy offer, and they're the ones that are listed there, and where there are strengths locally to draw on. And I guess the narrative behind some of this is around building on strengths rather than filling deficits, I suppose. For each investment zone, as we understand it, there's something like an £80 million package. That's what the government, the UK government, have announced for England, which equates to about 20 million per annum over 4 years, with a balance between how that might be used flexibly between fiscal incentives, business rates, etc., and other forms of spending. We're not clear at the moment, though, what the process is in Wales or exactly what the rules are. But nonetheless, I think colleagues were keen to get ahead of the game and make sure that there was an expression of interest in place to put on the table for Welsh Government at an early stage, and to influence some of that. Within the proposal, we've cast this as being a green industries investment zone. You'll have seen on the previous slides that green industries, broadly cast, is one of the government stated priorities, although they don't give a huge amount of detail as to what the government specifically mean by green industries. Clearly a strong strategy base in support of that. The Regional Economic Delivery Plan, which we worked on a couple of years ago with you, very much emphasises net zero and the opportunities associated with South West Wales decarbonisation potential and its renewable energy offer. We've tried to set out the prospectus as being complementary with the Celtic Freeport, and indeed a large part of the narrative within this is really around adding value to the Celtic Freeport and indeed South Wales industrial cluster, and essentially filling in the gap, if you like, across the region between the Celtic Freeport offer in Neath, Talbot and Pembrokeshire. There's an emphasis within the government's guidance on the contribution that universities could make and building on research assets and so on. So we've tried to build this in, and we did consult with Swansea University, Trinity St David, Further Education, as well as local authority colleagues in putting this together. So that's the core narrative. The statement at the top is the one that's on the front page of the prospectus, linking together those two Freeport locations, enabling the whole region to maximise its potential overall, and incorporating both important renewable energy projects as well as sites for business expansion and industrial development. We've done a very much an initial view of what the potential benefits of this might be, and simply based on looking at what could be generated from floor space unlocked, etc. That yields that figure there of around 5,300 jobs, 3.9 billion additional GBA. You can agree with that or not. That's broadly in line with the figures that have been quoted by other parts of other places that have been allocated an investment zone in England. So essentially, we're trying to reflect what they've done. There's a high-level logic model which we've set out in the document, essentially starting from what we've defined as some green industry strengths. As I mentioned, there's no real definition of green industry in the government's documentation. We've interpreted that as meaning those 5 areas in green there, as areas in which South West Wales and Swansea and Carmarthenshire in particular have a number of strengths. We've then tried to define in broad terms some key locations where potentially a package of incentives might be of value. That includes Swansea Energy and Transport Hub and Port Development, or Blue Eden as previously known, Llanelli, Swansea City Centre, Nantycarrows Park Velindre, and Crosshands Growth Zone. We've identified a series of opportunities that might unlock, and then that feeds into the regional impact that we've set out there. What we've tried to do in putting the prospectus together is really get a bit of a balance between being high level enough that we can be flexible in the light of whatever the guidance turns out to be, and responsive to whatever the reality is, while at the same time trying to give enough specificity to be clear that we're talking about some defined areas and we're building on some key strengths. In defining the green industries focus, it's quite hard to do this really, because in the end all industries will be low carbon industries, otherwise they won't exist, and that drive underpins all of this. But we've tried to identify some areas where there are some regional strengths which can be reasonably well evidenced. Energy production and distribution is well articulated. Agriculture, agri-tech, and that wider sort of agri-tech and bioscience economy, advanced manufacturing, high value, low carbon services, and the final one there, which we've called technology in the built environment, is trying to capture those industries and those activities that will be needed in decarbonising the building industry and so on, decarbonising development. The 6 locations for growth we've set out there. They're kind of broadly defined, so they're not areas that have a very specific red line around them. I guess if the guidance develops and there needs to be some enterprise zone style zoning for business rate retention purposes or business rate discount purposes or something like that, then there probably will need to be some firmer lines on maps. At this stage, we've very much not done that. It's broad brush, broad locations, trying to set out a balance across the 2 counties. And we've tried to make the point that this is an integrated offer across Swansea and Carmarthenshire as part of the wider region, not something that is very clearly divided between the 2. In terms of where we go next, essentially the prospectus, subject to comments and further development, is for engagement with Welsh Government and to speaking with them about this. As I say, we don't know what the future application process is at the moment. It may be that there isn't an application process as such. It may be that Welsh Government just designates a particular area. In any case, Celtic Freeports clearly requires a business case, and I understand that's going through its OBC process at the moment. So presumably this would as well, if we were successful in achieving it. I guess when we come to that point, there'll be some further work to think about how the package might work between something which is very location-based, i.e. incentives on particular sites, versus something that's much broader and perhaps a programme of spend. And we probably need to think about what can be realistically delivered within the time frame of this designation. So still quite a bit of uncertainty around this, but hopefully helpful in getting something on the table and getting something that you can share with colleagues in Welsh Government as appropriate.
Okay, Ross, thank you very, very much for that. Very, very clear presentation. Before I take questions to Ross on the presentation, I'm going to call in Jason Jones to take us through the prospectus. So, Jason, if you'd like to come in.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't got anything in terms of the prospectus to add in detail. Ross has covered that in the summary, but it's very much around an opportunity for us to pitch to Welsh Government to put a marker down. As Ross has mentioned, there's no certainty around what might be forthcoming from Welsh Government and what they're likely or otherwise to support. But it's important for us, I think, to have that early dialogue, and all of the activity and the proposals in the prospectus are aligned to our regional economic development plan. So it's not new, it's adding value to and fully aligned to one of the 3 missions. So hopefully the CJC is happy for us to have those discussions with Welsh Government on that basis, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And certainly I'd fully support what's been articulated today. I think, look, pay credit to the work that was done by colleagues in Neath, Talbot and in Pembrokeshire in terms of the work to secure the Celtic Freeport. The investment zone, as was outlined, is very nicely aligned to that in terms of a proposal. And we have a real opportunity, given the assets in our region, to become a real powerhouse for that green energy transformation and green economy transformation. So for me, there are no reasons not to do this. I think, you know, Welsh Government, we do need to get in the door as early as possible, because I know counties in the east of Wales were quite upset at not securing the Freeport, and they will be redoubling their efforts around investment zones, I'm sure, as will counties in the north. So I think our region really needs to get in there first, have an articulated offer on the basis of the prospectus, so that Welsh Government know we're serious about securing this alongside the Celtic Freeport. So I certainly would support the efforts do that, and obviously we'll do everything I can to promote the region's aspirations in this area. So I'll call in colleagues as their hands went up. So I'll come to David Simpson first. David.
Thank you very much, Chair. We live in exciting times. I think it's an absolutely super proposal. I think it's all started off with joint working with the Swansea Bay, which led on to the CJC, which led on to Freeports. When we had the Freeport bid and we were successful with that, we had an area in between, and I think your spokesperson just now, person presenting, said, you know, this is filling the gap. And I think we've got, as you said in your own words then, quite a powerhouse. And that powerhouse is just starting to build. And I think it is an excellent proposal. Back it fully. And well done to all the officers that put all the work in to make this proposal go forward. Thank you very much indeed.
Yep, thank you, David. Fully concur with your comments there. Darren Price, I come to you next.
Yeah, just to add to what David's mentioned there, I think you know, they are exciting times, and you know, we've spoken on a regional basis, haven't we, over the past few years, in terms of the importance really of maximising the benefits from these natural resources that we have. You know, we are blessed, aren't we, in a sense, in terms of what we've got to offer, and it's absolutely vital that we take advantage of that. Building on what David mentioned, obviously, we were content to support Pembrokeshire and Neath Talbot in that Celtic Freeport bid, because we clearly saw the advantages, not just for those two local authorities, but for the wider region. And I think that's a principle that we've been working towards now for quite some time, in terms of ensuring the whole region benefits from what we've got to offer. And certainly from my point of view, I see this as complementary, you know, and enabling us to deliver some of those benefits that we've seen outlined today, both in terms of job creation and uplift in GVA. You know, from my perspective in Carmarthenshire, you know, it would be great to see some of these sites we talk about, Nantycoust, you know, Crosshands and Llanelli, really benefiting from intervention. So it's exciting. I fully back it, and would be grateful for the support of leaders across the region, really, as I say, in maximising those economic benefits on the back of the wonderful natural resource that we've got here in South West Wales. Diolch.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. Again, fully agree. Come to Steve Hunt next. Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I'm not going to add too much to what David and Darren said. I think we're, as a region, we're in this together. I mean, we've maximised all our opportunities. This is certainly an opportunity we cannot miss out on. You quite rightly stated that other areas across Wales and regions will be going in as well. So we've got the best, I think, officers right across our corporate joint committee in all of the regions, and some excellent officers working extremely hard to try and make things happen. I just wondered on timescales and finances that are needed to deliver and develop this programme going forward, given where we are with not just the Freeports, but the Welsh Government, the uncertainty with the political world as well. I just wondered, coming from you, I have not too much information, but I just wondered, while you've got everybody on the call, where we are sort of developing and delivering timescales, exactly the complexities going forward. But 100%, as Darren and David and you, I'm sure, as all leaders, we're fully committed to be behind this. It just, I you know what I'm like. I like to see progress. I like to see things happening, as I'm sure you all do as well. But just precautionary. Where does this go now from this meeting? And really, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I think some of those are some of the unknowns in terms of the volatility that we've seen in national government, but also the lack of clarity over some of the processes. But I'm sure Jason or Ross can add a bit more detail in terms of where we are. So, Jason, I come to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, you're absolutely right around the volatile landscape. So in terms of where we go next, this would be a pitch to Welsh Government. That the clarity isn't there yet at the moment in terms of how they wish to proceed. We're aware of the discussions between Welsh Government and UK Government, and UK's clear indication that they will only fund one investment zone in Wales. There has been talk, as Ross alluded to, of Welsh Government actually allocating that one location if that's the route they're to go down. Hence why the suggestion that we make this pitch immediately or as soon as possible. And then it will be for Welsh Government to respond, and are they going to open it up to competition, which will need a bit more work. But we also need to be aware of the fact that, you know, 2 free ports in Wales, when the intention was one originally, has given the Welsh Government Treasury some implications to consider, i.e. loss of that revenue from rates and business rates and what can be afforded. So there's the financial landscape as well. So we'll make the pitch, and we'll see what that results in. I'm sure there'll be numerous ongoing discussions following that. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Sorry, thank you, Jason. I'll come to Karen next. Karen?
So I'm just going to remind the committee, Rob, that I brought a paper when the prospectus was launched, first of all. So it was a couple of months ago. So you have already given authority to the Chief Executive to have discussions with the Welsh and UK governments on the investment zone policy. And there was also a resolution that a letter was to be sent from yourself to the Minister, which did happen. So I guess it's just being clear for the minutes what the next action is. And I'm guessing that there's probably a need for another letter from yourself with a request for some kind of meeting, because there's no covering paper this morning making a formal recommendation. So I just wanted to clarify that, just so that we're clear about the actions we need to take forward from the discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. It's a helpful reminder. And in the interim as well, of course, leaders have met with the Minister in Welsh Government, where we again relayed the work that was going on both at CJC, City Region, Celtic Freeport, and the intention to bid for an investment zone. We did mention that directly to the Minister when we met him. But I think it's absolutely right that we follow that up with meetings as is necessary. And I would broaden it to allow the committee, the leaders, to take any actions necessary, really, to make sure that we make it clear to Welsh Government and UK Government that we are keen to secure the investment zone in this region. Okay, Will, I'll come to you next. Will Bramble. Will?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a small technicality, and I'm probably a slip of the tongue by Jason, but as a member of the Freeport Project Board, I just wanted to emphasise that there isn't a loss to Welsh Government in revenue. The Freeport is about creating additionality, and I think language is very important in that regard. So the whole concepts of tax sites and free ports, which I suspect will be mirrored by investment zones, is about creating additionality that wouldn't otherwise exist, development that wouldn't otherwise exist, was it not for that special apparatus. And I think additionality is what we're talking about, not loss of revenue to Welsh Government. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Will. Okay, well, look, thank you, colleagues. I've heard no one speak against the outline there. And if everybody's happy, we'll note the presentation, say thank you to Ross and to Jason for their updates on the presentation, and we will crack on with making sure that Welsh Government know exactly how serious we are about securing the investment zone and take all actions necessary to try and secure it. Okay, everyone happy? Yeah. Okay, thank you. We'll move then to the Q1 financial monitoring 23-24, which is on pages 61 to 64. I'll go over to Chris Moore to take us through this. Chris.
Chair, I'm going to cover this item on Chris's behalf, just to introduce myself for the committee. My name's Randall Hemingway. I'm the Deputy Section 151 Officer for Carmarthenshire.
Okay, welcome, Randall.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Chris has just been called away on some other urgent business. The Corporate Joint Committee budget was agreed at some £618,000 when the committee met back in January of this year. It was funded by a levy on the 4 constituent authorities and represented, as you might recall, the do minimum budget. Against that 618,000, we're currently forecasting an underspend of 329,000 this year. It's primarily made up of three key components. So there's an underspend on the subcommittee's activity, and primarily 90,000 underspend on planning and programme management. There's also an underspend on regional management. The business manager post is vacant at the moment, and there's also reduced forecast spend on external consultancy costs. And finally, we also have an underspend on support services, and that's primarily because the senior accountant post has not been recruited to. That's been held vacant on the basis it's not justified currently based on the level of the committee's activity at this point. So just a very quick overview. I'll take any questions committee may have. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Randall. That's really helpful. I just I guess as Will pointed out earlier, just making sure that the language and context is accurate and important. I think we did go for what could be described as the do minimum option, but actually I would describe it as do the maximum you can with the available resources. And I think that was the point that leaders had made here, which is we were expecting additional support from Welsh Government for the operation and for the functions within the CJCs. That is something we continue to press Welsh Government for. So we've done as much as we can with the available resources, but of course we are still pursuing Welsh Government for the necessary resources in order to do the maximum we can do. And that is the point here. Our ambition is to do the maximum we can, but we need the proper resources from the government in order to do that. So we haven't opted to sort of slow things down or change things. We've just done as much as we can with the available resources. So again, I know obviously because these meetings are recorded and maybe reviewed, and I think it's important we have that on record. Karen, I'll come to you next.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to make a very brief point that the workshop session that I referred to earlier, we would want to have a conversation about the treatment of this year's projected underspend in that context. That's the only point I wanted to make, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important that we take a chance to take stock and look at how we can deploy any underspend to support work into the future years. So that is something, Karen, I'm grateful if we can obviously arrange, and we'll make sure that workshop happens. Okay, so any questions or comments for Randall in terms of the update? If not, then we'll note the first quarter monitoring report. Again, thank you, Randall, for that. Really appreciate you stepping in. We'll go then to the next item, which is Welsh language standards on page 65 to 72. Karen, I'll come back over to you. Karen, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I brought a paper back probably last year, I think it was, where we voluntarily adopted Carmarthenshire Welsh language standards as a basis for the committee's work. We were encouraged, if you recall, by the Welsh Language Commissioner not to wait for the statutory process to embrace the policy objectives around Welsh language. So what this report is saying is that the Welsh Language Commissioner has now started that formal process of determining which standards will apply to the Corporate Joint Committee. We've had a discussion with the Welsh Language Commissioner's office to say that we'd adopted the Carmarthenshire standards on a voluntary basis, and we're hoping that what that will mean is that we'll be able to conclude the statutory process much more quickly than councils would have experienced when they went through the same process. So you can note from the report that we've got the ability to respond to the Welsh Language Commissioner up until the 5th of January 2024. What we're doing at the moment is looking at what the Commissioner is proposing against the standards we've already voluntarily adopted. And the intention is to bring some advice back to you at your next meeting then to formalise the response from the committee into the Welsh Language Commissioner's process. But hopefully we can get a fair degree of consensus for the Welsh Language Commissioner quite quickly so that we can avoid some onerous process around all of this. So that's all I wanted to report to the committee this morning. As I say, there'll be an update report for you at your next meeting that will then make a recommendation as to the formal response that we submit within the consultation period.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Again, really helpful. Everybody happy to note the update from Karen with the aim of the report coming to the next meeting? Yeah, everybody happy with that? Any questions or comments for Karen? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Karen. We move on to the next one, which is the RTP implementation plan for submission to Welsh Government. This will be on pages 73 to 88. And if I go over to Stuart, who can take us through the transport plan. Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just briefly run through some of the key points on there. So yeah, they're seeking approval for the implementation plan to be taken forward to be passed on to Welsh Government as part of the duties which have been placed on the CJC. And the implementation plan itself it starts on sort of page 78 really, where we talk about the policy context. That lists the main, I guess, overarching policies which need to come into play for it. So I'll just get to that page. So the main key driver is the Llwybr Newydd and the National Transport Delivery Plan and the Wellbeing Future Generations Act. So they're the key drivers in terms of Welsh Government policy on there. And then the transport plan needs to reflect all the economic strategies and the drivers from the region. There's two main strands itself for the development of the regional transport plan. The first one is developing the case for change. So that's the key parts of this is a lot of modelling to understand what's going on at the moment and where the key drivers and priority areas are. Also stakeholder engagement and consultations to understand what people are expecting, what people want from the transport plan itself. Let's say significant amount of modelling work. The first part of it is to be submitted to Welsh Government in line with their timescales, which is by the end of February 2024, which is obviously not far away in terms of for this piece of work. Along with that, we need to identify the sort of vision for the RTP, the smart objectives in terms of on there, what we're say key things that we want to deliver through it, establishing the governance for it, and the stakeholder and mapping and engagement plan for it. So all that work is to be done so by the end of February. So that's the first strand covered. The second part, which follows on after approval from that, is developing the transport plan itself. So this also involves the sort of high-level interventions and policies which need to be developed, and also reviewing the previous RTPs, the previous joint transport plans which have been in place, assessing what's been delivered, what needs to be taken forward as part of that plan, and what needs to be removed, and also developing a methodology for prioritising the schemes, which schemes have been taken forward and delivered in terms of ahead as part of that. So that's the main parts of there. The timescales really for delivery are quite challenging in terms it's 2025, March 2025, when the main plan is to be delivered. So the key risks as part of the plan itself and the development of the RTP are listed on in this section here with the risk identification. So I guess the key ones are the timescales for the development submission of the RTP. The guidance was delivered quite a bit later than was initially anticipated, with the fixed date of 2025 being sort of set some time ago. So the challenges of the consultation required mean that it is going to be very challenging to try and deliver it in that time. The resources, there's a couple of things relating to the resources. There's the short-term resources for developing and delivering the regional transport plan itself. So we need clarity in terms of support from Welsh Government from that perspective. And the other element is really about the level of funding that's ahead to deliver the regional transport plan. So we get the right balance between having an ambitious regional transport plan, but also having something which has got a kind of something which can be delivered, a clear, meaningful list of schemes and programmes and projects which can be delivered through it. So they're things that we're very keen to try and establish. So as part of the risks in terms of to respond to it, section page 85 of the report is a draft letter to the Minister, which picks up on all the risks really, and the recommendation is that's submitted along with the regional transport plan itself. So that picks up on all the risks and suggests that there's dialogue to try and address that with Welsh Government. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Stuart. Appreciate the run through. If we perhaps move and second the report first, then I'll come out for comments and questions. So I'm happy to move the report. Could I ask for a seconder, please? Yeah, thank you, colleagues. Okay, I'll come to people as hands went up. So, Darren, I'll come to you first. Darren Price.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. This is clearly an important document for us. But as Stuart mentioned in the introduction there are clearly risks for us, and there are risks that need to be highlighted to Welsh Government at the same time as we submit the plan. This was discussed by the Transport Subcommittee, which I chair a few weeks ago, and there was concern across the region from members of all local authorities, really, in terms of some of those challenges. And they're not new challenges in one sense, because they are things that we've discussed on a number of occasions at this main CJC meeting, and it was referenced to earlier in terms of resource being a primary one. Resource initially in terms of revenue to actually develop the plan, and as you see, the 125,000 that was committed by Welsh Government or announced by Welsh Government hasn't actually been delivered yet. So that's a pretty straightforward one to address, really. I mean, the commitment was given, but we haven't received the funding. There's a wider discussion, as we're aware, in terms of the actual cost for developing the plan. And as you will be aware, Chair, when we discussed the budget last year, the cost of doing that run into the hundreds of thousands of pounds. So even the £125,000 that the Welsh Government have committed doesn't touch the sides, really, in terms of the overall ask for us. And I think it's vitally important that we raise that again with Welsh Government. I did speak to the Finance Minister yesterday. She happened to be on a visit down to Carmarthenshire, and I certainly raised that issue with her. But I think we need to formally do that in the form of a letter when we submit this plan. The longer term challenge is actually, what level of capital funding are we likely to get is a pretty fundamental one as well, as Stuart mentioned there. It needs to be ambitious, yes. I think we'd all agree that we want to see public transport in South West Wales develop and go to the next level, but we need to be realistic in terms of actually what level of funding we're likely to get over the medium term, because that'll certainly shape the strategy over the next few years. And I think the third one that I also press home on is that issue of timescales. As Stuart mentioned there has been a delay in terms of the guidance that Welsh Government has provided, yet the end date in terms of when we're expected to submit the final regional plan hasn't shifted an inch. And I think there needs to be some reasonableness from Welsh Government there, just to acknowledge the fact that there's been slippage at the front end, which needs to be reflected, really, in terms of when they expect the region to submit fully. I think that's something that'll challenge not just South West Wales, but CJCs across Wales. And I think it's about we have that discussion on an all Wales basis, really, to try and get that fairness built back into the system, because they are going to be challenging, and we don't want to rush this. We want to get it right, and that's the key message. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. And again, I think anything we can do to make sure we receive the funds that we've been promised. Again, I'm happy to intervene on that one again, because again, if we've met all our requirements, there should be no reason why the funding hasn't been released by Welsh Government. I'll come to Steve Hunt next. Steve.
Thanks, Rob. I won't repeat what Darren said. There's a lot in there that I was going to touch on as well. I just looking at the risk identification and political agreement of policies, high-level outcomes. I'm just concerned that whatever Welsh Government does has an impact, irrespective of the funding that we should receive. When we look at the regional transport plan, I mean, the announcement recently of funding for the rail industry, leaving behind the bus, that for me is critical. I'm sure it is down in Carmarthen and Pembroke and Swansea to a certain degree, and it's a worrying time. We know next March that the funding for support to the bus industry is finishing. So I just wondered where we are going with our regional transport plan by identifying the needs of our communities and those that use the transport generally, to be honest, and how do we as a CJC whilst the plan is set out, and I'm supportive of the plan, of course, but it's just detail into the plan of what is actually needed for the region, because of the way Welsh Government direction is going is not aligned, in my opinion, with the aspirations of what we need in our local authorities. So I just wondered, where do we feed in here? I keep saying I'm new. It's going on 18 months now, so but perhaps I'm not understanding the mechanisms of how the CJC works. But I just want to put that out there, Rob, to be honest with you. The bus industry is critical for Neath Talbot, and I just wondered where we feed that into this regional transport plan. So sorry if I'm all over the shop and trying to explain where I'm coming from, but I just see that train, while the transport is quite important, I don't think it is as important as our buses at this moment in time. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And look, I think the points you raise are really fair ones and important ones. I would say it shouldn't be a choice between bus and rail. We need both, because they're both part of that integrated transport network that we want to create. I think, look, we've got to look at the context here. And again, I'm not making a political point here. I'm just making a financial point. Wales is still owed several £billion as a consequential of HS2. We've all raised that point previously. I know everyone in the Senedd, I believe, has raised it. Just to put that into context, the several £billion that we talk about or refer to sounds like a very throwaway number, but when you turn it into what it delivers every metro that we need in Wales. It can resurface every road in Wales in terms of the backlog, and it can make the changes to support our bus services that we need in Wales. So that consequential that is currently denied to Wales because the UK government decided to term HS2 as an England and Wales scheme has really disenfranchised the Wales nation of a significant amount of money that is currently being awarded to Northern Ireland and to Scotland. We're being treated differently to other devolved parts of the UK, and I know there are some reasons that would be argued for that, but I'm sorry, this is money due to the Welsh people for the infrastructure that they require. And I've said to Welsh ministers and anybody else who will listen that I think we should be considering taking legal action against UK government for the stance they've taken on HS2, because that is a significant amount of money that could do so much good for our transport systems in Wales. I think the other point I'd make, Steve, is that, look, given that Welsh Government are bringing forward a bus bill shortly, this plan will help us to inform some of that. And I think, if that bill does become law, then we've got to take the opportunity to use that to try and improve our transport systems and to take more control as local authorities over the services that run in our area, because you'll know as well as I do at the moment, we have little or no control over bus services. Operators can remove services with just 4 weeks notice, and all we can do is to try and encourage operators to make changes in the plans that they have. I would like to see us have much more power than that, because we are the ones held accountable when people can't travel in the areas, and people look to councils to ensure that services don't disappear. So it's something that I would like to see us take more of a role in, and I hope that the bus bill and then the other legislative changes, and hopefully securing the money, will allow us to do the things we want to do on transport. So I don't disagree with you, Steve. I'm just saying it's that broader context, and there is a big pile of money sitting over the border in England that we need to get our hands on. That we do. Yeah, so Steve, I'll come back to you before I go to Emma.
Yeah, just very briefly, Rob. I agree with everything you said, but irrespective of what we wrote, we've talked about the Barnet consequentials for over 20 years since the Senedd have started. What I'm getting at is what is difficult for them. 900 million overspent in this year. I understand the complexities and the conversations that are being had, and I support you on everything you said. It's just that in the roundup of things, and again, you're right on the point you're saying about the private, the bus companies got their own, got profit. They need to make profit to sustain themselves. It still seems to be left behind from Welsh Government. They do have their own bus company with Traws Cymru, of course, that they've invested in. and that serves Powys, well, and comes through my ward actually, down through Craigna there in the Dilys Valley. So I get where you're coming from. That's all I wanted to highlight, is that try not leave the bus that's more critical, because if you look at the stats, the buses are used far more than any of and I'm not, no, I know when the money you've got to look at how you spend it in the best possible way, as you've highlighted. And I get that with the metro, etc. But it's still, I'm saying, making sure we do not leave the bus services behind, because in the rural wards, it's going to be massively detrimental long term. Well, short term now, and medium and long term. That's all I want to highlight, but thank you for your response.
No, thank you, Stephen. I think we all share your concerns there. I'll go back to officers as well in due course, but I think we've had some assurances from Welsh Government officers around funding for next year already. But again, I don't know whether that's formalised yet, or whether it's been something that's in discussion, but certainly I'm sure we've had some assurances around that. Anyway, I'll come to Emma next. Emma?
Yes, thank you very much. Really important strategy, and I just wanted to say that Health and indeed the Regional Partnership Board have an interest in that. I note your engagement section at the end, but if we are clearly very interested in that, and very happy to talk offline about how we can get engaged in an appropriate way.
Absolutely, thank you, Emma. Stuart, you had your hand up. Do you want me to come back to you?
Just a couple of points, I guess. I'll address Emma's first in terms of, welcome very much the sort of engagement. Health is certainly, a key stakeholder in terms of making sure we get the regional transport plan right and reflecting the needs of the communities. So yes, you'll be integral to that process. So I think the early stages, once this plan's been approved, is to identify the key stakeholders and start that process of consultation, understanding what the needs are, the current needs and future needs, really. So very much a part of that. And I suppose for Councillor Hunt, really, it was just a reassurance that the regional transport plan is very much, it's sort of I guess the Llwybr Newydd sets the transport hierarchy in place, which is sort of active travel at top, public transport, and going down to the bottom of it, which is the private motor car. So that, bus will not be forgotten. This isn't the RTP is not a matter of sort of addressing rail. There are different strands that in terms of happening at the moment, which are things like the metro development, and part of that is the metro development of rail, but there's also metro development looking at buses as well. So that's kind of the programmes that are underway at the moment, but the regional transport plan will be about sort of setting and establishing the policy context for it to operate and make sure we've got all the different strands brought together. So certainly reassurance that buses will not be forgotten as part of, they're extremely important to across the region in terms of numbers of users and accessing for communities. So thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Okay, any other comments or questions for Stuart on the report? If not, it's been moved and seconded, so I could ask all those to show if they're in favour of the report, please. Thank you very much. That's carried. Okay, thank you, colleagues. We'll go on to the next item, which is the Audit Wales letter, commentary of the Corporate Joint Committee progress, pages 89 to 98, and I'll go back to Karen, please, for this item.
Thank you, Chair. And I can see we've got Sarah Jane Byrne as well on the call from Audit Wales, and I'm sure Sarah will welcome an opportunity just to summarise and pull out some of the conclusions that they've reached in the report. But just by way of introduction, you'll be aware from a number of reports that we've brought to you over the last 2 years or so that there are a range of statutory duties that have been placed on corporate joint committees, similar to what local authorities and national parks will need to discharge. And Audit Wales have the responsibility for auditing our compliance with a range of those, specifically around the duties set out in the Wellbeing Future Generations Act, but also now there are additional duties within the Local Government Wales and Elections Act as well. I was pleased to see the conclusions drawn in this particular letter, because it does, from my point of view, demonstrate that we've made some good progress in discharging a range of those duties. You will see from the covering report that I've highlighted the child poverty plan and the participation strategy as two particular pieces of work that we need to develop further as we get into the corporate plan for 2024-2025. But I would also highlight as well that the auditors have drawn some conclusions on progress on the regional transport plan and strategic development plan. I'm sure Sarah Jane's going to touch on that in a bit more detail, so I won't do that. But I have been really clear with the auditors that there is an ongoing conversation between the committee, between leaders in particular, and ministers about who should be funding the planning processes, but also as well, following on from your last discussion, the amount of investment available once those plans are there to actually deliver the change as well. So I think I let Sarah Jane explain why the Auditor General has come to that conclusion. And the only other thing I would say is, since we put this into the committee system, the Audit Wales have also produced their overview report, which summarises the position across the whole of Wales. And I know when I was briefing you and the Vice Chair the other day, Councillor Price asked me about, well, how do we compare with other CJCs across Wales? That is now available, so I will bring that to the next meeting of the committee. But again, Sarah Jane may touch on some of that, just to give you a bit of context about how we're doing when she makes her remarks, Chair. So that's all I want to say at this point in the process. But of course, if there are questions that any members of the committee want to direct towards me once Sarah Jane's given her overview, I'm more than happy to help to answer those.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, Sarah Jane, would you like to come in?
Hi, yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just quickly to introduce myself. So I know a few of you, not everyone. I'm Sarah Jane Byrne. I'm one of the audit managers at Audit Wales and was involved in this piece of work. I just a bit of background really as to why we did this piece of work. So obviously CJC's new audited bodies, the ADW is the appointed auditor. And in his work programme, he set out that he wanted to do some work over those new audited bodies, including the CJC. So really to understand, how those arrangements were evolving. So it was a bit of a kind of a first stage approach, really. And we did some initial work last autumn and fed that back to representatives from the CJCs about springtime. And then we did some further work in the summer to update our findings, really. And thanks to all those who contributed to that work. So clearly recognise that, the letter sets out a position at a point in time. Things have clearly moved forward. I can see that from the discussions you've had today, and I'll pick up on that in terms of some of the kind of the functions. And as it says in the covering report, we will be keeping an eye on progress and, coming along to these kind of meetings, having discussions with the chief executives and others over the course of the year, really just to kind of keep an eye, as I say. So hopefully we'll probably arrange to meet Karen and other officers probably in the spring. But, this meeting, for example, has been really helpful to help me understand where you are now. So we have issued letters to each of the 4 CJCs. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail. I appreciate you've had the opportunity to read it. I'll just quickly go through some of the main points from each of the sections, and I'm happy to take any questions afterwards. So it's set out along a series of themes, really. I think, understanding of Welsh Government aims, as it says there, you had a clear understanding of what those aims were about. I think it was apparent that you weren't wholly supportive of the need for the CJCs. However, we could see that was linked, and you've had lots of discussion today about resources and about continuing to have those discussions with Welsh Government about that. But you were really positive about the opportunities that the CJC could bring. And again, I've heard a lot of that today, with the discussion about the investment zones, for example. In terms of governance arrangements, actually we found that, most of your core arrangements were in place. Some, most were up and running. I think the key ones were the subcommittees and the kind of functional subcommittees. At the time of our work, those weren't kind of meeting, but I can see that there has been meetings of some of those recently. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee, had developed its work programme and that kind of thing. So, I think what we saw, and this was, a consistent approach to what we saw with the other CJCs, is that pragmatic approach, recognising where you are on the level of activity that the CJC is actually operating at. It was really positive to see that the CJC had actually sought to involve the national parks more than, beyond its kind of their statutory duties. So that was good. And that's linked to the kind of the partnership approach, which I'll touch on later. So, really, can see that some of the steps have been taken, and we're keen to see how all of that will progress, really. In terms of clarity of plans, clearly got a clear vision, building on the work of the Swansea Bay City deal. And you exploring options and how those two arrangements could work together, looking at how you minimise administrative burdens, that kind of thing. At the time of our work, we felt that progress with delivering the SDP and the kind of RTP side of things was more limited. We were very aware that some of that is down to the fact that some of the guidance had been late. And we've, in our summary report, when you see it, we've talked about the concerns about Welsh Government preparedness, which they've acknowledged, and obviously around things like the financial status issues. All of that did impact upon CJC's ability to progress. So we're very aware of that. I think, we felt that there had been some guidance and things and lots of discussion going on between officers. So we felt that there could have been, some movement, but it's positive to see that those discussions have been happening again more recently. And I can see you're going to be writing again, I think, to Welsh Government around the RTP side of things. So, we will be keeping an eye in terms of those progress. And I guess Karen touched on the kind of the public sector duty side of things, and I can see there's plans in there to do the child poverty action plan, but we could see, to be fair, the CJC had made progress around some of those other aspects, and it's positive to see that it's been engaging with the Welsh Language Commissioner, I know, also with other WFG, etc. In terms of partnerships, this was a positive finding. You've talked today again about sort of working with other organisations, universities, and the co-option arrangements that you've got. So all of that is really, really positive. And again, we're kind of keen to see how all of that progresses in terms of maximising that collaborative power in the region, really. And then the final section is really around WFG. The CJC had published its wellbeing objectives, but I guess the key message really is that we're looking to see that underpinning everything you do. There's a real opportunity to do that. We talk in there about the corporate plan and the consultation and everything that you went through. So I think we will continue to do examinations around that. We have a duty to do that. So, through these kind of meetings and discussions I mentioned with officers, we'll be wanting to keep an eye on all of that, really. So, yeah, so that's kind of where we are. And as Karen said, we are about to publish a summary report. That is the cumulative findings from the 4 CJCs. What I would say is, it needs to be read in conjunction with those individual letters, because some of the findings are quite general, but some of them will be more pertinent to some CJCs than others, because the CJCs have flexibility around how they operate to a certain extent, and they're each at different positions. So it's been quite tricky to kind of have some of those generalised statements, and that's why we letters as well. So just to say, that will be coming out. What I would say on that, it's difficult because it's embargoed at the moment, so it hasn't actually been published, but hopefully I think we've taken a balanced approach to that. It is reflecting a bit of what we found at the beginning when we did our initial work, that I think we had some initial concerns about the progress, but we do definitely touch on the concerns around Welsh Government preparedness and the impact that had, but we're more optimistic about the progress we've seen over the last kind of 4 to 6 months. So, I think it takes a balanced overview of where CJCs are at. But yeah, happy to take any questions, because I appreciate you've had the chance to kind of read the letter. And as I said, that national report will be coming out hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Thanks. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. Really appreciate you running us through that. Any questions or comments for Sarah Jane on the report? Or the letter, sorry. Yeah, Councillor Price, Darren.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah, thank you for that introduction, Sergeant. It's really interesting. In terms of the Southwest Wales context, we're fully aware of what the challenges are there and where we're at. And I think we've made informed decisions based on, as we've suggested earlier in the meeting, really, the sort of resource that's available to us at this point in time. Now, clearly, the establishment of the CJC was before my time. I've only been in post since last May, but certainly the chair has referenced in previous meetings the sort of commitment that Welsh Government gave in terms of ensuring that the establishment of CJCs wouldn't have an adverse impact on frontline services. So there would be additionality really in terms of funding in order to deliver those additional duties that we're asked to deliver on a regional basis. Now, clearly, from my experience in the past year, as we sort of heard in the discussion around the RTP, We've seen the commitment to £125,000, which in the grand scheme of things, as I mentioned earlier, doesn't touch the sides. We're talking about a multi-million-pound programme if we're going to undertake our duties effectively over a number of years. And it comes at a time, of course, when we've got pretty acute financial pressures, facing us as local authorities as well. And so as a council leader, I find myself in a position where I'm having to look at making cuts to frontline services such as education, social care and leisure, things that really impact on residents across Carmarthenshire, whilst at the same time being asked to contribute a couple of £100,000 into a regional body, which, with the best will of the world, as we've heard already today, is at risk of generating a wish list in terms of its long-term vision for the region. So I would hope that Welsh Government would understand really the pressures that face individual councils when we're trying to make progress on this regional agenda, because if I can be blunt, if it's a case of putting £500,000 into developing a transport plan which may or may not bear fruit in 5 or 10 years' time, or allocating £500,000 to supporting schools or social services in the county, well, I know what my local residents would expect me to do, So those very real sort of financial pressures, I think, need to be recognised. And I'm just clearly the All Wales report is under embargo, but I'd be interested to hear from you maybe whether you've experienced any CJC in Wales who have come to you and said, yes, we're satisfied with the resources that we have available. And if that hasn't been the case, do you envisage any recommendations going to Welsh Government as a result of those discussions that you've had with authorities across Wales? Diolch.
Thank you, Sarah. Over to you.
Do you want me to respond? Yeah. So I think it's fair to say, based on our work, that I think the point about ourselves, it wasn't raised consistently with us, but that's not to say that it's not an issue. I think being upfront around that, it came through very, very strongly from yourselves. So. I think we reckon we're obviously aware of all the different challenges, and you're clearly writing to Welsh Government to explain all that in terms of the RTP, etc. But it doesn't come through strongly. We're not making recommendations specifically around resourcing in this. I think it's our point is it's still very early days. We're really keen to understand what's going to happen on that. If we need to do more work on it, we will. This is why we're kind of wanting to just keep an eye on things over the next 12 months. I think we do reflect on some of those initial challenges, that things weren't, the preparedness, as I mentioned, in terms of things like the financial status also, was a bit of a barrier initially to kind of kickstart things in the way that CJCs would have liked. But the point about, the resources has come through most strongly from yourselves. Now, obviously, officers have got those regional discussions as well. I can't comment on whether those are coming up through with the other CJCs more recently. I don't know. I think, Karen, whether there's anything particular, from discussions with the other chief executives from the CJCs more recently around that. But as I said, it did come through most strongly from yourselves.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think, look, I understand obviously it's for you guys to decide what you actually make as recommendations. I think there's an inevitable disadvantage built into the regional structures in terms of the way in which Welsh Government have currently organised us. In the east, there are 10 counties contributing. In the north, 7. And with 4. Now, if you do the maths, obviously, the less members you've got, the bigger the burden falls on each of them for the function. So I think it's an important point that does need to be Welsh Government do need to be reminded about. And again, I go back to the early days of the discussions on CJCs, which is, we're happy to make these work, but they've got to be properly funded. And the commitments on funding have to flow through that were made in the early days when we were discussing CJCs as an option for regional collaboration in Wales as opposed to reorganisation in Wales. And that was where we were, and we've entered that discussion on good faith. So I think the points that Councillor Price has made, I'd fully agree with. and you know, it is important that the pressures we face are recognised in terms of the costs of running regional structures. That's you know, these things do not come as light touch organisations, as we found, because we have all the obligations placed upon us that all other counties and councils would have. So it is important that that point is addressed, and if it's not through the report, then obviously we'll continue to make those representations directly ourselves. David, I'll come to you next.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to support Darren's stance. Really, very difficult. You know, many years ago we had lots of talk about CJCs and the benefits they were going to bring to the area, and there was funding coming through, and this is the way to go. And we all went into it with an open mind and welcomed it. But I do have the same concerns that Darren has. We are being given targets, if you like, or aspirations by Welsh Government, what they'd like us to see us doing, but it all costs money, and it's money that we haven't got. As Darren is saying, we have to make very difficult decisions in our budgets at the moment, and to then have to justify putting money into CJCs, it is a very difficult place to be. And I'm sure I speak for all 4 leaders around this table. I particularly think Welsh Government should be coughing up some money. Thank you.
They were to be self-funding, David, with support if needed from Welsh Government. That is the basis on which we gave our support. So
the support is needed.
Absolutely right. Because I think that the point Darren made was very, very clear, which is we are ambitious. We want to do more, but to do more, you need the funding, and that's the bottom line on all of this. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. I'm sure you'll have heard those, even if you are unable to incorporate the additional comments in. But either way, we look forward to that report when it's published, and we will obviously continue to press the point locally. So if I could ask colleagues, I will move the letter. Can I ask somebody to second, please? Thank you, David. And all those in favour of accepting? Okay, thank you. That is carried. And with that, that brings us to the end of our agenda. I've not had any requests for any urgent items today. So can I thank you all very much for your attendance today and for your contributions, and look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. Thank you all, colleagues. I'll declare the meeting.